Before we dive into this extraordinary tale of apparent communication across centuries, it's important to understand that the Dodleston Messages remain one of the most perplexing technological mysteries of the late 20th century. What follows is an account that blends documented events with claims that have never been definitively proven or debunked. A perfect storm of technology, history, and the unexplained that continues to provoke debate about the nature of time and reality itself. In 1984, a high school economics teacher named Ken Webster, along with his girlfriend Debbie and friend Nick, moved into an 18th century brick cottage in the small village of Dodleston, England, near the Welsh border. Dodleston itself was unremarkable, a quiet parish, with a long history dating back to the Domesday Book of 1086, when it was recorded as a relatively large settlement within Atty's Cross in Cheshire. The cottage they occupied was undergoing slow, unenthusiastic renovations at Ken's hands. Little did they know that this modest dwelling would soon become the epicenter of one of the most bizarre technological hauntings ever recorded. The first indications that something unusual was happening at Meadow Cottage came in the form of traditional poltergeist-like activity. 6-toed footprints appeared in the dust, seemingly walking up the walls between the bathroom and the kitchen. When Nick attempted to cover these prints with paint, they reappeared the next day. Cold spots were reported throughout the house, along with moving shadows and sensations of an unseen presence. While such phenomena are typical of haunting claims, what followed was anything but conventional. The real mystery began one evening when Ken, Debbie and Nick were returning from the local pub, the Red Lion, which still trades to this day. They reportedly saw a pulsing green light emanating from their cottage windows. Upon entering, they discovered something truly unnerving. A message displayed on Ken's BBC Microcomputer, which he had borrowed from the school where he taught. What made this particularly strange was that the computer wasn't connected to any network, and that was typical in the mid-1980s, and no one had been home to type the message. The message itself was cryptic and addressed to them by name. Initially believing it to be a prank, Ken and his housemates began leaving queries on the computer, turning it on and then leaving the house. Upon returning, they would find responses. The first messages were described as deep and cryptic, discussing concepts like nightmares, fame, growth, and death, as if summing up life and death in one poem. As the exchanges continued, the entity identified itself as LW, and later as Lucas or Lucas Wayneman. Eventually, the entity claimed to be a man from 1546, or 1541 as accounts vary. Living in the same location as Meadow Cottage, the messages from Lucas became more detailed over time, written in what appeared to be 16th century English, with period-specific spelling and grammar. They painted a picture of Tudor life. According to these communications, Lucas had lost his wife and son to the plague, harvested barley for ale, and made his own cheese. In one notable development, Lucas described his house as humble, made of red stone, and sitting on a pretty parcel of land. During renovations, Ken and his friends allegedly discovered a foundation made of red sandstone beneath their cottage, seemingly confirming an aspect of Lucas's description. Ken sought to verify the historical accuracy of these messages. Peter Trinder, who examined the communications, reportedly found the dialect, sentence structure, and intermittent use of Latin placed the messages in the middle of the 16th century in the Cheshire area.
Fairly early on that I was able to feel that I could identify the area that he came from, which was the southwest. And later, there were 2 or 3 words which were specific to the southwest. I mean, for example, that word pill, meaning a little inlet on the River Severn.
The messages referenced King Henry VIII being married to Catherine Parr. correctly placing the time frame in the 1540s. However, attempts to verify specific names mentioned, such as Richard Wishel, were unsuccessful. This is a critical point where evidence gives way to hearsay. While the general historical context seemed accurate, specific verifiable details were lacking. The mystery deepened considerably when a new entity began communicating through the computer, claiming to be from the year 2109. These messages had a different tone and style, often referring to the communicators as they, in the plural. That's spookily prescient. The entity from 2109 suggested that it was monitoring and sometimes interfering with the communications from the past. It claimed that Lucas Wainman was actually a man named Thomas Harden, a vicar from Gloucestershire in the 1550s, and that it had been deliberately obscuring certain facts. This added a layer of complexity and raised an important question. If this was a hoax, why introduce a second entity that complicates and potentially undermines the credibility of the first? Conversely, the introduction of a second communicator could be seen as an attempt to paper over inconsistencies in the original story. The SPR investigation, according to Ken Webster's account, the Society for Physical Research, sent investigators David Welch and John Bucknell to examine the phenomena. They allegedly devised a test where they would type 10 questions for the 2109 entity, delete them from the computer, and then see if responses would come without Ken or Debbie knowing the questions. Days later, the 2109 entity supposedly responded, addressing the questions in the correct order without explicitly repeating them. The investigators reportedly speculated that sensitive microphones could have been planted to record the sound of keystrokes, allowing Ken to deduce the questions. That seems to be a stretch. In a strange twist that further blurs the line between evidence and hearsay, Ken later contacted the SPR to obtain their records of the case, only to be told that there was no record of such an investigation. No record of an investigator named David Welsh affiliated with the SPR, and John Bucknell had disappeared. Frank Davis, another teacher from Ken's school, reportedly visited to witness the phenomena. He described the computer room becoming extremely cold for 2 to 3 minutes before returning to normal. After leaving the room for a while, they returned to find a new message had appeared. On March the 21st, 1985, Lucas sent what appears to have been his final message. In this poignant communication, he indicated that he needed to leave Dodleston because the locals were very wary of him. He mentioned plans to travel to Oxford, where he would write a book about his experiences. The message concluded with an invitation across time. One day, you will all sit down at my table for wine and mead by the river in Oxford, where we shall read each other's books and laugh, and we shall speak of truth and good men watching Oxford change together for evermore. After approximately 2 years of mysterious communications, the messages ceased in 1986. Ken Webster later published his account of these events in a book titled The Vertical Plane. It's crucial to distinguish between what can be considered evidence and what remains unverified claims in this case. The actual text that appeared on the computer would be primary evidence, but we only have Ken Webster's published account of their content. Multiple individuals, Ken, Debbie, Nick, Frank Davis, claim to have witnessed aspects of the phenomena, though their accounts come primarily through Ken's narrative. Some historical details in the messages were accurate to the Tudor period. Though this information would have been available in history books, the discovery of a red sandstone foundation beneath the cottage potentially corroborates one specific claim made in the messages. Perhaps the most damning counter-evidence comes from an analysis that found the frequency of adjectives before nouns in Lucas's messages, which was 26%, matched almost exactly with Ken Webster's own writing style, 26.6%. This strongly suggests a single author for both. The Society for Physical Research allegedly claimed no record of the investigation. That contradicted a significant portion of Ken's account. Names that were mentioned in the messages, such as Richard Wishel, could not be verified in historical record. Even in the 1980s, it would have been possible to program a computer, even a basic one like the BBC Micro, to display pre-written messages at specific times. This would create the illusion of supernatural communication. Several theories have been proposed to explain the Dodleston messages. The paranormal explanation. Proponents of this theory suggest that genuine communication occurred across time, either through some form of psychic connection or through what paranormal researchers call a time slip, a temporary overlap between different time periods. The hoax theory. Skeptics argue that Ken Webster orchestrated an elaborate hoax, potentially with the help of his girlfriend and friend. The linguistic analysis showing matching writing styles strongly supports this theory. The publication of the vertical plane also suggests a potential financial motive. And then the psychological explanation. Some suggest that Ken Webster may have been experiencing some form of dissociative state or psychological condition that led him to create the messages unconsciously. The technological explanation? Another theory proposes that some form of electronic interference or technical glitch caused the computer to display text, which was then interpreted through the lens of the paranormal. The Dodleston messages have maintained their grip on popular imagination, inspiring discussions, podcasts, YouTube videos like this one, and continued interest in paranormal circles. The story has become a touchstone for those interested in electronic voice phenomena, EVP, time slips, and technological hauntings. Ken Webster's cottage still stands in Dodleston, a quiet reminder of the strange events that allegedly took place there. A Reddit user who grew up in Dodleston shortly after the events shared a photo of the cottage, noting that it has quite a large driveway to the rear that's used as the main entrance to the house. Interestingly, this same Reddit user mentioned that their parents, who lived in Dodleston at the time of the events, don't recall anyone talking about the strange occurrences until after Ken Webster and his friends moved out and the story made the news. As with all great mysteries, the Dodleston messages leave us with more questions than answers. If this was a hoax, why did Ken Webster create such a complex narrative with potential contradictions that might expose the deception? If genuine communication occurred across time, why hasn't this phenomenon been replicated or documented elsewhere? What happened to the SPR investigators who allegedly examined the case but later could not be located? Did Thomas Harden, aka Lucas Wainman, ever reach Oxford and write his book as he claimed he would? Could there be another explanation that we haven't yet considered? Perhaps involving concepts from quantum physics or theories about multiple dimensions? Perhaps most tantalisingly, if the messages were genuine, what was the entity from 2109 trying to achieve by interfering with the communication? The Dodleston messages stand as a fascinating case study in either genuine paranormal phenomena or the creation of an elaborate technological myth. Whether you believe they represent actual communication across the centuries or an ingeniously crafted hoax, they remind us that the intersection of technology and the unexplained continues to challenge our understanding of reality and the boundaries of what we consider possible. As we continue to push the frontiers of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and our understanding of the nature of time itself, perhaps one day we'll finally unravel the true story behind the enigmatic green text that appeared on a simple BBC microcomputer in a small English cottage nearly 4 decades ago.